Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Christian Reeve podcast. Today's guest is a TV producer, music producer, DJ, man of many talents. His name is Ollie Read. Welcome to the show. How you doing?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you very much for appearing on the show. We've actually caught you at a very interesting time, I feel, in your career because while you have a career in TV production, and we'll get into that, you're kind of transitioning now into music.
Yeah.
So let's start there before we delve into the specifics of your music and your TV careers. Let's look at that transition. Why now? What's changed for you? Why are we delving into that now?
Yeah, so I guess like most people in the world, they always have this kind of this side hustle, this interest, and that just for me happened to be music. But it only really kind of it started well, I started DJing yeah, a few years ago when I went to university. That kind of like opened me up to this world of um electronic music production and DJing and then I've been musical my whole life. I was one of those kids that kind of got pushed to play a musical instrument by their parents when they were much younger, and then ended up hating it.
What did you play? What was
So I played piano
okay? It's not too bad.
from a very early age. I think I started when I was like four or like maybe even three.
Damn! Wow.
I kind of
Okay.
like yeah, as I grew up, my brain developed. Like I just had music there the whole time. So I guess that kind of that helps in a lot of things. But then yeah, trumpet as well. I played that until much later. But then I kind of stopped for a while, and then it was only when the pandemic happened, and you have a lot more free time on your hands that I thought, oh, you know what? I've always wanted to. Why not start trying to compose and get in production? Turn those songs that you're like humming to yourself in the shower into something actual physical. And then just yeah, timing and everything kind of a year had passed. And from watching online videos and stuff, I finally released my first music, which was self-release. But then from that, I managed to get signed with a label. And then, things were going great. And then I had a bit of a down period, because, the day job picked up a bit, which I love. So that was the TV side of things. And, doing such interesting things from like shows for BBC, Netflix, Channel 4, all these great shows that you're able to work on and create. But then about a year, 2 years ago, I thought, okay, I want to get back into the music again. I've had a bit of a down period, maybe a year out of it. And then so I started to pick that up again. And then now you've just caught me really at the start of me picking it back up again. My latest release um, went to the top 10 in the dance charts.
Congratulations.
Um,
That's huge.
Thank you. Yeah. So it's kind of like good so far. So far, so good. Want to continue that success at the minute. I'm eager. I've tasted it. I'm hungry.
Absolutely. Let's. I don't like to try and focus on negativity, but I like to kind of hit all different areas. You mentioned there was a bit of a down period, and you
Mm.
said that it was about because of your TV work picking up. Now, was it a situation where you just didn't have time at all for music, or was it just kind of like walk me through that a little bit, and then how you were able to kind of push it back to where it needed to be?
Yeah. So I think a big side of it was time.
Mhm.
You'd be working not exactly a 9 till 5. It would be like
Right.
crazy hours, and then so you'd either what I found is I'd either get home from work and be so exhausted to the fact that I didn't want to create anything,
Mm.
or there's small times, you might have like one weekend day where you actually do have time. You sit down, and I had no inspiration whatsoever. Like I was creatively drained, I guess.
Okay.
And I don't really know what happened, what changed. I think it was I my brain kind of needed a bit of a reset. You know, there were a lot of things going on in my life that kind of distracting, getting in the way from being able to actually pursue the music. Um, and then so that's I guess why it took a bit of backseat. And I guess it was never intentional, but it just naturally happened. And then yeah, after that certain amount of time had passed, I had like a new spark, a new kind of like, oh, you know what? Actually, I really want to make this. Or I'd find myself cooking dinner or in the shower or even like lying in bed sometimes. I'd be like thinking of this tune. I'd be like, shit, I need to get up and do that.
I know exactly where you're coming from on that. It's one of those typical things, isn't it? It just hits you, and you're like, crap! I really need to get this down right now, before
Yeah,
it goes.
exactly. And I think that was the first kind of thing that kind of spurred me into it again was because you sit down to do it. You're in front of your computer or you pick up a musical instrument and you can never think of anything or do anything in that moment. And it was one night I was literally laying in bed and I thought, screw it. And I got up from bed, went to my computer. It must have been like early hours of the morning and just like started making it. And then once I started that, kind of, the ball got rolling, started that journey.
It's the thing about songwriting, isn't it? It's interesting because I got the same thing as you. I
Mm.
can't like I have to wait until I either feel like I'm in the sounds so douchey to say, but like the zone for it, the mindset for it. Like you just
Yeah,
have that
no,
feeling
yeah.
like now is the time. Or you have a really piercing idea, like, like I've often used it as a form of therapy to just deal with stuff like, oh, feeling depressed, sit down, write a song, right? Write
Yeah.
something. You use it somehow. Um,
Well, that's what music is, though, isn't it? It's that kind of like that transfer of emotions and feelings from yourself into music.
well, not always. I mean, generally speaking, yeah. If you look at like the best music created, you ask the artists, they'll be like, yeah, hard times. That's what you're hearing.
Yeah.
But then other times it's like you hear songs and they're not written like that. They're just kind of, and they might even be good, but like they're just not necessarily written about a real event or anything. They're just
Mm.
So I suppose it depends. It depends on a person's ability maybe to communicate certain things, and it also I suppose depends on how you voice that message, how you kind of put stuff together. I mean, I don't know, like I hear something like I'm a big Radiohead fan, for example, and
Yeah.
the
I
song
literally just listened to them.
they're amazing, aren't they? Yeah, like
Yeah.
I don't know, like I listened to a song like "Fake Plastic Trees," and I'm like, wow, it's such a heartbreaking song. And then it's weird because like you read about how the song's created, and it turns out it was somewhat of a joke, not exactly a joke, but like the lyrics were supposed to be just nonsensical. It's supposed to be kind of a
Mm.
silly song. And then when they went in there and he just did the take, he like broke down afterwards because he put like everything into it. And it's like,
Yeah.
I think you can't always account for that sometimes. Like I get this sometimes, like music that I wrote when I was in like a dark place kind of thing is now like I don't feel that way anymore. I'm in a better
Mm.
headspace, but like whenever I play it, the one or two things happens. Either like I feel like I'm tapping back into that and it's like, oh, this is a slippery road,
Yeah.
or it just feels like distant in a box and it's you play it, you recognize it, but it's still detached from you kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, how do you feel about the music you write? Like, how connected to it are you? Is it for you just good music, or is it like more of a personal thing for you?
I would say it's about 50-50. Um, I mean, in fact, 99% of the songs I write and create, no one's ever going to hear them, and I hate them. You can spend hours obsessing over and producing a song, and then
Gold mine
you
right
know
there.
yeah, you overdo it, and you're kind of just like, you know what, I hate this, and then you put it to bed. But
I'll say this
then
now. If you ever become like huge musician, right? Yeah, save all that stuff for your
yeah,
fans, and like one day release it as part of like a B-sides extra stuff. And I bet you any money there's like a ton of bangers there that you thought were shit, but actually people will think is amazing. Bet you
yeah,
any
you know,
money.
I'm gonna write that down, and then one day in like 30 years time, I'm gonna make a big buck from that. But yeah, no, I think the thing is with the music I make is it's electronic music. It's not it doesn't have the same energy
Hmm.
as other genres might. You know, like jazz is different from rock, is different from house. You know, but one thing I do believe is that all music has, all right, I might not be in a dark place when I write something, but I think that it still conveys an emotion to the listener. So,
Hmm.
you know, be it house music or techno or something, you know, it's going to be making them feel um, that energy and want to dance. Just as Radiohead, for example, won't necessarily make me want to dance, but it will, you know, it conveys this emotion in my head. I mean, if I did start like boogieing to it,
It's a
it'd be a bit
tragic
worrying.
dance, isn't it? The dance of
Yeah.
the dying. I don't
Maybe a waltz, but yeah, it kind of conveys that emotion. I feel like that's what I always try to do with my tracks, and that's sort of
know.
like the holy grail in my mind is that if I make anyone feel anything, then that's job done.
How much time have you spent sort of performing? Because I know, like, being a DJ and like doing a gig like as a DJ is a bit of a different experience. Say, like, I've always been in like rock bands, metal bands, singing on
Mm.
a stage, whatever. Talk us through kind of the performance element for you and what that's like and how that kind of is enacted.
Yeah, so so the performance is it's interesting because DJing always has a bit of a bad rep in terms of like the music performance kind of community. A lot of people think it is just pressing a button. But the thing is with it is it's okay. It's as someone that plays musical instruments, I would say that it's not necessarily the same sort of pressure that you have, and like you know, you play one note wrong, and then it can cock up the song. But then with DJing, you don't really have that. But I feel like there's elements to it where you need to kind of transform the audience's night and sculpt it into something that you are in charge of. You know, you want them to have a good time. You want to make them feel something. And I feel like, yeah, when I've DJed in the past, I've, you know, the first few gigs that I had, I went to it with, okay, I've got this set, I've rehearsed it to a T, but then it would never, and it would sound amazing, but it would never translate on the night because I wasn't reading the room. You know,
Interesting.
you kind of, you know, you're playing some songs and they might go together really well, but the audience might then want something even like more energy, or they might want something to like, you know, just give them a break
Uh,
a bit. It's been super intense. And you can always read the room a bit when I'm on stage and I'm kind of viewing the crowd and I'm kind of seeing how people are dancing. Normally it's the people like pushed up against the barrier or whatever, having like the time of their life. They're normally the best, the people giving you fist bumps. But then, you know, it once you get rid of that kind of pre-prepared kind of, I mean, yeah, you might have some songs that you know go together and you're like, oh yeah, they're a really good combo. But once you get rid of that set, you can it kind of opens your world and your possibilities to kind of make everyone's night even better. And so nowadays I just improvise. You know, I never plan anything. I'll
I
go,
think
oh, I
it's
kind of want to play this, but
what you're saying there about like reading the room. Like, it's the only way to approach something like this. I mean, and I think it does kind of somewhat, yeah, it applies to atypical performances with, say, with like instruments or whatever. It's the same. It's the same vibe. Like
Mm.
you always have a set list, and you can mix and chop and change according to the room. You know,
Mm.
like I think a good example of this is like if you're playing in a high energy place and everyone's like wants to hear the big tracks, and then you're playing like more acoustic stuff and chilled, and it's like very depressing. It's like you're just killing the energy in the room, and
Yeah,
everyone's like,
exactly.
"Come on, man, give me something." But like equally, what's different with the type of music that you do is it's kind of like a journey, isn't it? It's like
Mm.
you're kind of trying to somewhat of it is prediction, but a lot of it is the crowd gives you almost like the instruction manual. They're like, no,
Yeah.
we want this, and it's like you've got to quickly, I suppose, adapt. Like something that's interesting to me is like, okay, so one area that it differs is like if I'm playing like in a typical band, we can just
Mm.
choose to just play a different song, switch up the set list. But you've kind of pre sort of like edited this, put it together. So like, how do you kind of make last minute changes to kind of adapt to what the audience is demanding from you?
I will kind of just know my I'll know my
He's
like
just born perfect, man.
yeah, exactly. I just know. Like, do you not know? But no, I'll kind of like so with DJing. I mean, for any of your listeners that don't know, you have a library of songs on your USB that you'll then plug into the DJ controller, and then from that you'll be able to then work with them, and you can pre-prepare things and set cue points in songs so that you can more manipulate them more. So you press some buttons and it goes to different places, it does different things.
Right, so
um,
you could set it kind of like a multi-track system. So you could like switch to different songs at will, blend them
yeah,
in,
yeah.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
You can play, but if it's a good big venue, you can have four decks at once. So
Damn.
you are able to kind of almost create a song from other songs.
Yeah.
Almost, like so there's been more than a few occasions where I've taken one song where it has a really good beat, and I found a section in that song where that beat is just playing, and I'll loop that beat. And then you have another song that might be like a 80s classic or whatever. And then you can kind of almost sample that song as you're doing it. So you're almost like creating a new song live. But that's like the extreme example of being able to kind of plan these songs and kind of manipulate them and turn them into something that you want. But then you need to know your USB and your catalog inside out so that when if you're like, oh yeah, I planned this thing and you think it's going to be great, it's going to be sick, everyone's going to love it, but then the vibe in the room just isn't asking for it at that moment, you kind of need to read it. Then you can be like, okay, right, that song, maybe not, but I do know this other song, which will go really well with it. And then so you have to like think on your feet, kind of should
Okay.
be able to chop and change. Like no song's going to last more than 3 or 4 minutes, so you kind of need to jump on it, I guess.
I gotta ask. We'll go negative to positive. All right.
All
So
right.
we'll bring it back up. Worst shows ever. Come on. Tell me of some fuck ups, either on your part or someone else, where it just absolutely bombed and there was no way of saving
Yeah. Okay. Right.
it.
The one that comes to mind is um my first ever gig that I had.
Okay. Well, to be fair, you can be
And
forgiven on this before we get into this. This is
yeah,
forgivable territory, but yeah, go
but
on.
it was on the DJ controller, you've got this button called Q. Anyone that knows DJing will know it's like a big orange button that's right next to the play button. That if you press it, it kind of like goes to a cue point that you've set, and that's always automatically at the start of the song. But it's just like it's right next to the kind of like the mixing channels. And so I'm playing and it's going great. And then I'm like almost like use my hands to kind of you do the mixes and then the kind of like palm of my hand, the bottom of my hand accidentally hits the cue button on the song that's playing and it just stops everything. And the crowd just
Oh,
like goes like, what the fuck just happened? And I was just like, shit, what do I do? And like, this is my
oh.
first time playing live and I kind of it's just silence and it's the most awkward thing and it
How
only
long?
happened for like 2 seconds of silence
Okay.
but I was just like it felt like an eternity and that was like I still have nightmares about that. You weren't there.
No, I get it, man. I get it. It happens. It happens. All right, switch it up. Best
All right,
performance ever.
best performance I would say has to be I so I went and did my masters in Falmouth,
Oh wow.
down in Cornwall. And if anyone's been to Falmouth in Cornwall, they'll know that it's kind of a small town, not really much going on. And there was hardly any like DJing, house, techno, no nights like that. And so I got a bit tired of it and so set up my own event and went to this bar club and was like, oh yeah, can I put on my event here? And then we ended up doing it. And that night was, although it's not like the biggest venue I've ever played, but it was by far the best because it was almost like so intimate and special that it just like you felt just on another level. Like there was this almost like this booth above the dance floor where the DJ was, where I was. Um, but we allowed it so that the audience could kind of like come up and mingle as well as being on the dance floor. And that kind of created like this kind of vibe that everyone was digging, everyone just loved it. They felt like almost special being up there. And then they like connected with you more because they're dancing right next to you. And it just felt really special, really good. It was one of those. It was the night where I've had the most compliments of like music and everyone having a great time. So I have to say that was yeah that tops it.
Awesome, man. What was the kind of what kind of comments do you generally receive about performances? I'm kind of intrigued because I've never actually interviewed a DJ, so this is all kind of like new to me. Like as far
Yeah,
as like
right.
learning and such. Like what's kind of the comments that you tend to receive?
So I would say most of them are kind of people. You might play a really good song and mix something in, and people are like off their tits and might be at the front and they're like, oh my God, mate, that was so sick. And like want to fist bump you and stuff. That's the most common. The second most common would be like wanting to know your set list because you've introduced them to really sick songs.
Oh, cool.
They really want to know that. That's a great compliment. Um, and then yeah, sometimes you just be like there afterwards and like people would be like, oh my God, mate, that was so like just like digging it. It's exactly the same as if you played guitar on stage and people come up to you afterwards. They're like, "Bro, that was so sick." Kind of like just the general kind of stuff like that. But yeah, it's good vibes. Fills you with
Awesome.
energy.
Let's switch it up and
Yeah.
talk about your career in TV production. So you are a TV producer and have worked for the BBC, Channel 4, Netflix, just to name a few. What would you say have been your kind of most memorable experiences in your TV production career?
Gosh, so it has been for someone who's kind of quite young. I feel like I've experienced a lot in a very short time. So it was partly helped by the pandemic
Mm-hmm.
and the production company I was working for had to slim down, but I stayed on and I kind of had to do like 4 or 5 people's jobs.
Wow.
And so this meant though that I picked up a shit ton of experience, and it allowed me to go across a lot of different productions and I got working on so I was actually in development at the time. That was my actual job, the one that I was being paid for. I was in development, so that's where you come up with show ideas and then you turn them from like a basic, oh, would it be cool if we did a show about man eating bread? And then you turn that idea into an actual structured format that can be made into a show, and then you sell that to a channel, such as BBC. And when I was working in that, we had an idea about Prue Leith, cook, baker. She's on Great British Bake Off. She was moving house, and she's a very likable character, and we got in with her, and we're like, all right, yeah, okay, maybe we can make a show about you're building a new house, and then it transformed into, okay, right, it's her planting her own garden, which this is like so opposite of what we've just been talking about. It's like so kind of tame, but it was so nice because what I did is I went from developing it, and then because of the pandemic, I was then able to then go and make it, and I spent weeks, months, just kind of hanging out at Brew Leith's house and like um, filming her and her small team kind of planting this new garden. It was just really nice. Like, you'd stop for lunch, and I'd always bring like a packed lunch with me, but I'd always go in and Brew Leith would have made something
Oh,
and be like, oh, no, 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 you have to eat this. I'm just like, holy shit, this is like this like celebrity chef that I'm just kind of just being just casually eating her soup or whatever, which was cool. That was a really cool experience.
awesome, man. You mentioned in that part of what you do is pitch shows to different TV producers. Sorry, TV production companies.
Yeah.
Um, Walk us through that process of actually pitching a TV show, and I'm kind of intrigued to know like the good and the bad and the ugly side of that because I'm sure
Yeah.
you get some pretty brutal comments.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's sort of like the music industry or like acting where you have to be good at being good at handling rejection. Because 99.9% of what you come up with, even though it might be a fantastic idea, will be rejected, and often for no reason at all. And then 5 years later, you'll see exactly the show that you've come up with or whatever. And it might not be that they're stealing something, but just like, it's not the right time and the place, right moment to get in with something. I have had some experiences that I can't talk about
Right.
where I'm pretty sure channels have been quite cheeky and
I was gonna
stolen
say,
some
like,
ideas.
how do you even combat that? Like, can you patent an idea? I suppose you can't really. Maybe a concept, but
Yeah, I think you can, but like so in the UK, we're
right.
lucky enough to have quite good copyright laws.
Mm.
It's not like America where you have to go to the office and get it filed and everything. Here, as soon as you come up with it, it's yours if it's something creative. But the problem with that is that if someone comes, say if I come up with a baking show,
Hmm.
but then the channel doesn't want it, but then they might then slightly change it to a it's almost the same, but they change one little format point, then it's no longer yours, and you got to prove it. You got to prove that they've done stuff, and like these are your customers as well.
Yeah.
So often you kind of just grit and bear it, and it's not worth the fight. But there have been a few occasions, well, a couple of occasions where it's been a bit of a kick in the balls. But no, I mean, I think in my experience in TV has been quite good compared to most production companies. So like most companies will have um maybe like one or two shows being commissioned each year, and we're a small team, but we got maybe like four or five, maybe even six a year, and then that's still only maybe like 5% of what you're pitching. You might come up with 100 shows a year, and you'll still be told no to all of them. Um,
Damn.
for some of them, yeah, terrible ideas. But you'll never pitch like a terrible idea. It'll always be worked through. But yeah, it's a bit of a killer industry for if you're not thick skinned.
How did you learn to deal with that? So like,
Um, I guess you kind of I guess you don't learn.
just
You kind of just you deal with it like that. That's the industry. It's
okay.
like you know my my experience in anything creative and knowing from other people's experiences is that it killer industries. There's so much rejection because it's all very kind of subjective. You know,
Hmm.
you could go to one person and they might hate an idea. You could go to another person, they might love that idea. However, you have to catch them at the right moment because they might be having a really bad day or they've just burnt their toast or whatever. It could be anything that could influence their decisions on these things. And so yeah, you kind of just deal with it. Like sometimes does get to the point where you're like, oh my God, like how am I going to crack this? I guess that's my thinking is not like focusing and dwelling on the negatives, but more like I'm determined to get some idea that's gonna crack it. Yeah, we're gonna get some commission. We're gonna make a really, really great show. And so I've just got to keep on working until we get that.
What's the craziest thing you've ever seen or heard happen on a production?
Gosh, what's the craziest thing? Not much, I have to say. Like it's all pretty well oiled. So I work in factual TV, so that's basically anything that doesn't involve actors. So that could be reality, it could be
Hmm.
a cooking show, it could be a documentary. But with that, and not a lot crazy happen. I mean, you do meet some really crazy people and get some really crazy scenarios. So the last
Like,
so the last few months, I was working on a BBC hip hop show. Will not say what it is because I
it's
can't.
fine. I
But
will. I will just say this for anyone who's wondering why. Like, you always have to remember that with conversations like this, lawyers and
yeah,
laws and yeah. So you're
they get
doing
in
a
the
good.
way
Yeah.
so much. I
No,
mean,
I
that's the
get it,
other thing.
man. I get it. Like, it's
Paperwork.
just, it's the same reason I never use specifics, names, anything. Just keep it
Yeah,
hazy.
it's like you might name a brand. You're like, but other brands are available.
Yeah.
But yeah, like so, working on a BBC hip hop show, doing the graphics for that, and on that we had loads and loads of incredible archive and footage and access to some of the pioneers of that genre and kind of having access to almost their personal lives. That's insane. After that, we were making a crime documentary,
Wow.
and I've met and spent time with um, some of the biggest criminals in the UK, like cocaine kingpins, or ex-cocaine kingpins, I should say. And like that's also insane.
What was it
And
like being in the
then
room with them? Did you? Because I mean, you're there to do a TV show, and of course they know
yeah,
that, but it must feel different in a large way. Like, do you feel nervous, scared? I don't know.
yeah. I mean, you kind of just you forget about it, I guess. You kind of yeah, like going to it, you're like, oh my God, this guy, he's like the biggest cocaine dealer in the UK or whatever. And then when you're there, it's kind of, you're just doing an interview or film something, and you're so kind of wrapped up in your job and your role, and you might talk to them, just have a little chat, just to kind of like be friendly and not be awkward. But you almost forget, like,
Was
this
there any
one
interest?
time
Yeah, also gone.
this one time I ended up getting this guy's business card.
Okay,
Um, and he was, I'm not going to name any names, but he
sure.
was a retired, yeah, cocaine kingpin who now transitioned to another business. But he was like, "Oh, here's my card. You know, if you ever need anything." I was just like, "Okay, cool."
Was there any?
um,
Is there any like crazy kind of well, maybe not necessarily crazy, but strange requests, weird requests from real people that you've dealt with on these sort of reality shows that
hmm.
maybe caught you by surprise, something like that?
I would say less of the crazy requests, more just you start to challenge your faith in humanity.
Ooh,
People
okay.
turn into, you can have absolutely lovely people, and that's one of the benefits of working in TV is you do get to meet all kinds of people from all walks of life, and it's incredible. And a lot of these people, what they do is incredible, but you also meet some people that are quite difficult. So there might be presenters that
Hmm.
might, you might think, oh, they're absolutely fine. And then they're the kind of people that would want to test every hotel room in a city that you're going um, to stay in to film to make sure that they've got the best one, or like
Okay.
um, sending people on massive runaround to get like a specific type of water that they might want.
Yeah. What gives with
Uh,
that? Like, I don't know. If I was ever working in TV, like, I'd feel awkward enough someone bringing me stuff anyway. But like stuff like
mm.
when I hear stuff like that, I'm like, come on, like,
It's crazy. It's absolutely insane. I mean, I have experienced some people that are really down to earth,
yeah,
and they're normally like people that you wouldn't really expect. So like normally the really big ones are the more down to earth people,
yeah,
which is strange. But then I'd say it's almost like a prima donna effect. It's sort of like the middle-ish celebrities that I've found to be the most difficult with dealing with.
what's the most
Um,
outrageous demand that you've been given where you were just like, no, this is ridiculous?
gosh, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I can talk about it. I'm sorry. I
Were there any you had?
don't want to damage any.
Were there any you had to maybe like turn down for some reason?
The
Like you
what,
just
sir?
was there any requests you had to turn down maybe for whatever reason?
Oh yeah, loads of them. I mean, it might be that they ask for something and then you just can't do it.
Yeah,
Might be that most of the time it's contracts and they ask for stupid amounts of money.
interesting.
There was a particular YouTuber influencer person that um I would say is big on YouTube, but not it hasn't had like TV time, and they were asking for more money than you would expect like a Hollywood A-lister to ask for to be on this show. And you're just like, absolutely not. Like, you kind of you get these you have these conversations, you don't know when to say, are you being serious? Like, are you actually joking with me on this one?
In that particular instance, were you able to come to an agreement, or did they just kind of go, "Oh no, it's not enough," and that's
No,
it?
no, we left it on that one.
Right.
Like it gets to the point where you have so much time on your hands and you can't keep on forking out it all for
This
certain
is what
people.
drives me nuts, man. Like,
Yeah.
because I know for me, like I'm a struggling actor, voice actor. I do a lot of different things, and
Mm.
man, what I would do for some TV time to like promote myself. Do you know what I mean? Like, you got to look at the
Yeah.
bigger picture sometimes. Like that TV time is so much more worth more valuable than the flat fee you're going to get paid to be on the show. Like, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
that when you put it into
exactly.
perspective, like your time is valuable, don't get me wrong, but like TV time versus YouTube time, like I still think
It's
TV
free
times,
promotion,
yeah,
basically.
internationally, you know what I mean? Just,
Yeah.
so frustrating.
I mean, you're almost having to do no work for it as well. A lot
Yeah.
of the time, a lot of people, they obviously they have to work for it, but there's no like preparations. You've got an entire production crew sorting everything else out. So if you're like doing a YouTube show where you've kind of like got to set everything up and you're kind of in charge and more responsible for things, as opposed to being on a TV show where 99% of it's done for you, then it's almost like nonsensical.
Mm.
I mean, there have been occasions like huge success stories where I worked on this show called I can actually talk about this one because it came out.
Hey,
Rich House Poor House. It's on Channel 5, and essentially you have a rich family that swaps with a poor family, so the rich family will experience what it's like to be poor and kind of grow a conscience, and the
uh,
poor family will kind of get a lot of benefits from it, and
right.
get set up with like almost like businesses, and like the rich family almost always ends up helping them,
That's cool.
and like offering them jobs or like helping to fix like a repair that needs doing in their house. But then there's this one show that just like kind of sticks in my mind of like this is why you just like TV is like the best advertising, best investment that you can have. This rich family went on it, and they did like cosmetic um uh features for women. And one thing they did as well was like if a woman has had cancer and they've lost their hair, or um, breast cancer, they've lost their breasts, and they can like tattoo on like eyebrows,
Right.
fake nipples, things like features that actually help. And in this show, they were genuinely lovely people, this
Mm.
this rich family, but overnight, from them just being on the show, their business received £250,000 worth of customers overnight, which is insane. It's like, of course you do it. Why
Yeah.
wouldn't you?
Yeah, no, that's exactly the way I look at it. It's like any opportunity to get um even just a little bit of advertising, you can do so much with it. Like that's the way I look at like right now I've been appearing on a lot of other people's shows and
Mm.
um the primary reason is the same thing because it's like you connect with new people, which is always valuable, and you also get opportunities to advertise yourself to win people over. It's always an advertisement of sorts, and I feel like especially when you're on TV, you're able to present yourself and show yourself in the right light. I will say this though. I think it does depend on the type of show that you appear on. Like
Yeah,
I've had
definitely.
offers to be, for example, on reality TV show, as in like those kind of shows, you produce for like ITV or something, and it's like they just
Love
want
Island, is it? Are you
no,
gonna be
no, no, no,
giving a bit
never,
on
no,
that?
no. But there was like similar shows where it was like they want quick sound bites. They want someone to be like, yeah, 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 this is me, yeah, yeah, party, party, party. Like they want that kind of person, and
Yeah.
that's not me. I'm storyteller, talk
No,
for a long
exactly.
time,
Yeah.
and it's fine. There's just different types of people. But I do think it makes you appreciate what you get involved with and how that affects your reputation and
Mm.
such. But one of the comments I always got from my audience, and I still to this day get, is people say, "Well, yeah, but like it's exposure, isn't it? You got to like
Mm.
look at it like it's an opportunity. It's always an opportunity, and it is something to think about. I do sit there and wonder sometimes, like, should I have taken it? Maybe you can transition it. Does it matter? Even if you're there for like one episode and you get, I don't know, voted out or something, like, bang, you're on
I mean,
television.
of course it matters. I mean, what's the worst that's going to happen as well? It's like,
Well,
I
I
mean,
mean,
obviously, if you're a dick and you're a dick on TV,
no,
then people are gonna.
come on. You know how TV production works. Even if you're lovely, you can be made to look like a dick. through
Well,
like creative editing
I'd say
and
that if you don't
questions.
do anything to be a dick, then you won't come across as being a dick.
Okay, question.
Okay.
Do you think sometimes when TV productions are edited in a certain way to make
Hmm.
someone look like a dick, do you think that's because that person has acted that way towards the crew and everybody? And so they're kind of like, revenge? Or do you think it's, as you say, just kind of someone just being a dick and the cameras just capture what they capture and the editors kind of go, okay, well, let's accentuate this?
I'd say yeah. So there's different scenarios where this could happen. Yeah, they could be addicted to the production crew, um, and then they're almost made out to be a bad guy in the
Right.
show.
Mm-hmm.
But then they have to be a dick on camera always. Because if there's no being a dick on camera, then they can't be a dick in the show. But then 99% of times where this has happened, the person gets made to look nicer than they are, which is interesting. Like there's been so many times where I've been like, oh, this absolute dick. Like, can't we just make him out to be an absolute like
Yeah.
tit on TV? But you always don't. Well, not always, but 99% of the time you don't because you're not there to ruin someone's life.
No, of course not.
Exactly. So like if they're on a reality show like Love Island, which I've never worked on, but I know on some of these shows that they do you know edit in a certain way so that they have characters. You need goodies, you need baddies, you need funny people, you need like stupid people, and so it is edited in a certain way to do that. But otherwise, if it's just like a show like Rich House Poor House, you're not going to make them look like a dick because they're real people and they have real lives outside of TV. You're gonna want them to kind of their lives not to be negatively affected after the show because it could come back to bite you. You
Have
know.
you had any instances like that where someone on a show that you produced was affected negatively, and how did your team kind of manage that thereafter?
We had we've never had it where they've been negatively affected in terms of like they've been made out to look like a dick or
Mm-hmm.
anything. But we had one person on a show that they didn't like. I mean, they looked fine, but they didn't then want something to be shown or be portrayed, and they then were like threatening lawsuits, and they didn't really have any legs to stand on because they've signed all the contracts and everything. But in the end, like the lawyers were like, "We can do this; it's fine." But then in the end, we ended up not showing it anyway because like you if you ended up showing that, I would feel like an asshole, and I don't want to be an asshole
Yeah.
at the end of the day. I want the people that I work with and that I film with to like me. I don't want to have this reputation of upsetting people and being bad. I don't want to be the bad guy. So at the end of the day, you just kind of you do you be as good as you can.
I suppose this begs an interesting question because, like, a lot of TV production companies kind of do have a bad rap because of some of the
Mm.
shows that have been produced under them. But then you get really genuinely good shows as well.
Mm.
Um, so
I guess with that, it comes to like, say if you meet one bad person in the street,
sure.
you're going to remember that bad person
Mm,
and it's going to stick in your mind. Everyone else might be lovely, but you're only going to remember that one bad person. And I'd say that's the same with TV shows as well, is that, there'll be that one example of how this production company and certain production companies are worse than others. Some of them have reputations of being kind of terrible. Um,
If
but
I
you
if I got
remember
this
that?
right as well, like for example, let's take a show like Jeremy Kyle, for example.
Yeah, right.
That show, like while it might be sort of like funded by, I think it was on ITV, wasn't it? I think no, or
Yeah, I think
yeah.
so.
Um, but then there's an independent production company that's responsible for it. Is that right? It's never like
Yeah,
directly. Like I suppose you do have some in-house productions, but generally speaking, a lot of the productions are external.
yeah,
Is that right?
yeah. They'll be made by the production company
Yeah.
for a channel.
Okay.
So the channel can still be liable. Like when you work with a
Sure.
production company, you have to um, meet certain guidelines, standards that the channel will lay out, but
What
they're essentially a customer.
What would you say are the kind of most challenging or difficult regulations or laws that you have to sort of contend with on a regular basis?
The most difficult one is um, and people always mess this up. Like you'd have thought that something so common to cock up that people would wise up to it, but it's where you film something in a documentary and they don't sign a release form, and so you can't use any of that footage.
Oh, mad, yeah.
So on many occasions, I've been sat across from someone who might be responsible for like sorting out all this stuff, and then hear like many obscenities spouted from their mouth as they realize that you can't use this entire scene or this character because people making it forgot to make them sign. And there, in fact, actually, yeah. So we did have a lawsuit brought to us from a. I can't talk about it. I'm thinking about how I can talk about this. Brought to us by a gentleman in a South American country that we'd filmed on one of our shows for Netflix, and they said that they didn't know that it was being filmed for Netflix and this, that, and the other. They definitely did. Like we've got them being like playing to camera, like them in a room, like the camera's rolling, like um in a room where the producer is explaining to this room of people what the show is,
Yeah,
but
this
they
is
didn't
interesting.
sign.
This is interesting though. So that wasn't like a scenario where the person was being filmed like one on one, was it? They're part of a
No,
background scenario. Okay. So
yeah,
this is key. I know that in the States, if
mm.
you're say filming outside, like on a beach or something, that's considered fair game, and all you have to do is like blur out the people's faces.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, I'm talking about a different nation here. How does that apply in the UK, and how come this? Actually, sorry, you mentioned that the man was South American. Was it filmed in South America, or was it?
It was,
It
yeah,
was
yeah.
okay. So, with that in mind, does that law not apply there? Is it different in South America somehow? Can you not just blur out the
Um,
person's face?
yeah, so it gets really complicated, and this is
Right.
where I kind of lose track of it because this is where the lawyers get involved. But it's basically like you always get them signing a consent form because
Right.
even if that's not the case in let's say Brazil, for example, but it will be the case in the UK.
Mhm.
So if it's an international show for Netflix, you need to have this kind of blanket cover for you. Um, we made a show called Inside the World's Toughest Prisons, which is on Netflix. And on that, you would have to get every single person that was on captured on camera, if in the background or not, to sign. Otherwise, you'd have to blur their faces. And for a production of this,
The prisoners had to sign release forms.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, this begs
So
an interesting question though, real quick. Um, they're in prison, right?
yeah,
So they don't have rights. Therefore, surely
no, they do have
they do
rights.
still
So
have rights.
that's where the
Because I would have
different
thought that
cultures.
maybe like the I don't know owners of the prison would be the ones to get to determine that or something.
Yeah, no, they do the owners of prison, they have to agree to it all and
Sure,
everything, but the prisoners, they're still citizens, they're still able to, they've still got human rights. And
absolutely,
so, I
right.
mean, obviously it depends what country it's in,
Hmm.
how well they're treated. But they do still have to sign, yeah. And if they don't, we can't use that footage.
Interesting. I got to ask
Yeah.
that time when you're working on that, what was it like working with those prisoners and hearing their stories and such?
So the show, it's pretty incredible. You have access to these people in such a personal manner that is so much different from anything else you might make, because these people, they're in prison, they're kind of at rock bottom
Right.
90% of the time, and so you're able to hear all these stories from people that are so personal, but um, also it can be quite weird and quite scary at times, because not scary because you feel threatened, but because you might be talking to someone that has committed a sexual offense, for
Hmm.
example, and you need to make them like you. You can't be like mistreating them, because they're not going to make a show with you. They're not going to be
Hmm.
on camera. You need to be nice to them, and also you've got to get them to trust you as well. And then so you can be in scenarios where you're talking to people that you really don't want to talk to. Um, and sometimes you almost forget why they're in there. They could be in for like armed armed assault. They could be in for sexual offences. They could be in for murder, and you're in there kind of on a very personal level with them,
Right.
which there's been times where I've kind of at the end of the day been like, wow, I feel really uneasy
Right.
right now about this kind of situation, and it's that's the job, you got to do it, and when the production's finished, you'll never speak to them again. But it's still like in that moment, you're like, oof, this is like really unnerving feeling. It seems unnatural.
What would you say are your biggest takeaways from that experience or lessons that you learned?
Oh God, kind of self-control, almost kind
Hmm.
of. So if you are talking to someone that has committed an offence that is quite bad, then you almost have to forget that um, your personal reasons for things, and you kind of have to do the job. And it's not for everyone. A lot of
Hmm.
people don't want to do that for reasons that is like absolutely understandable. But you have to kind of almost block out your own feelings, own personal um, wants, and just do do a job almost, and and also disconnect yourself from from your job and your personal life. You have to separate the two, because otherwise things can get confusing.
During the time that you were filming it, like, how did you sort of internalize that? How did you kind of manage that? I know you spoke just then about, learning sort of self-control and such, but you're taking this home with you each and every
Mm.
night. Like how did you kind of deal with that at the time and then sort of the immediate aftermath?
I guess, yeah, it is at the time you do feel you have feelings where you're like, oh my God, like this is uneasy. You almost get like that anxious kind of feeling in your belly. But then afterwards, I mean, because when you're filming it, you'll be staying in a hotel or
Hmm.
whatever, so you're there for a certain amount of time, and then when you come home, you you're not completely removed from the production. You know, you could say, "Oh yeah, I'll just do that," and then come home, and it's a completely different world. But you still got to have the aftermath of it, where if you're a producer, where you've got to deal with the rest of the show, the post production,
Right.
and so you do come home to it still being on your mind at night. But the thing that I would say is that you just kind of, yeah, you think that's work and this is personal life.
Right.
You really have to distance the two. It's sort of, you hear same from like police and
Yeah.
like, you know, detectives or whatever, where they're like, you have to distance the two. You can't ever get involved in them, which is also why, you never hand out any personal
Hmm.
details. You can never do that. Even if someone's really nice and you really like them, you think you could be a friend in real life, absolutely no, because it opens that door.
Was there anything that happened during the filming of that process, maybe that was shocking, threw you off guard, anything like that, that you were maybe unprepared for? I mean, you are in a prison for some of that production, so as you mentioned, it's already like an uncomfortable experience. But I
Mm.
imagine, you know, the prisoners are well aware that there's cameras on, and obviously we know that people act differently in front of cameras, and obviously these are
Yeah.
prisoners, so some of these people are maybe unhinged, or they're maybe they have mental health problems, or whatever the case may be. um and as you mentioned, it's some of the world's toughest prisons, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly. Yeah, so was there anything sort of that happened that was particularly shocking, and how did your team deal with that?
So there was there's been loads of different things. I mean, I've never felt like unsafe,
Right.
like I'm gonna be in harmed
Hmm.
in some way. But there was one scenario where, and it's in the show, where we're in a Colombian prison, and our presenter, he goes into this cell with his two new cellmates, he's going to be spending the week with, and they then say, "Oh, you have to pay us to be in here," and he's like, "Well, what if I don't?" And they're like, "Well, then we'll stab you." And everyone watches this show
Yeah.
and says, "Oh, that's so fake, that's so set up," but genuinely, that was not like, they just didn't care that the cameras are there. They were so like, "We're in here, like, so what? We're going to be in here for X amount of years. Like, we don't care that there's cameras in here. This is how we do it. You've got to pay us, or we'll stab you."
They kind
Um,
of meant like all of you, not just the presenter, like every one of
um,
you, kind of thing.
they kind of forgot that the camera was there. Like,
So
the
weird.
camera's in the cell with them. There's a cameraman there, there's a sound person, and there's a presenter. But the they're saying it to the presenter, and they don't care about the other two, you know. And we ended up, he didn't pay in the end, but they were so kind of like just unfazed by it. And this is what happens so much of the time on this show, is where prisoners, this is their life. You're going into their lives. This is their territory almost. Um, this is how it's done.
Mhm.
And that kind of that's fantastic for the show, and that gives such like authenticity, and allows you to kind of show you viewers how it really is a lot of the time. But then it's so funny because you always get the people where they're like, "Oh, that's so fake, that's so set up, oh, that's typical TV," but it's genuinely not, which is the crazy part.
How much stuff do you actually tend to fake on a general basis?
None of it.
None of it.
It's it,
Yeah, never.
it's illegal in the UK.
What do you mean?
American shows, they can fake some stuff. So
Okay.
like, there's certain shows that are documentaries, but they actually have paid actors to
Mm.
go in and pretend to be something. In the UK, it has to be it's trading standards. You can't fake a documentary. You can't fake anything. Um,
This
so
is
it can be a
interesting.
reality show, and you set things up. So like Rich House Poor House, we set up a day out for them, or we set up that they go and spend a day in the rich person's business and
Mm.
experience that. But you can never fake anything. Otherwise, that is breaking the law,
On
which is
what
really
basis?
interesting.
What would the law broken be?
I don't know,
Yeah.
but
All
I
right.
do know that you can't do that. It would
Ah.
be it's under like trading standards and guidelines, so that if it ever comes out that you did set something up on a UK production that is faked, and it does happen, but if it ever comes out that something is not how it's shown, then then you're breaking the law. You could be sued. The company could lose a lot of money.
What about if it's a production that's filmed elsewhere, but it's a UK production?
Yeah, still same rules.
Really?
Same rules. If it's a UK production company, then yeah,
Damn.
you can't fake it. You can, of course, edit in certain ways, like they do that with reality shows.
Yeah.
But you don't get that with production companies that are American, for example, which
Mm.
is why you do get a lot of this faked stuff in reality shows that are maybe filmed over there by those companies. But if it's a UK company that's filming in, so like if when we filmed in Colombia, we still have to abide by our standards,
Yeah.
which
It
is
broke
yeah,
it
crazy.
broke my heart like finding it out, but like I knew that that happened with certain programs, but like Gordon Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares,
Yeah,
that's like all fake. Like, it broke
yeah,
my heart. It broke my
yeah.
heart.
It's
And
horrible, isn't
for
it?
those who don't know, supposedly the fake elements are anytime you see customers in the store or the restaurant at any time, all paid actors. Also, this one's been proven as well. Pretty much the whole time that Gordon Ramsay is around that place, he has like one or two security guards around him, like to basically stop him from being like beaten up by the people. Because let's be honest, he says some crazy stuff.
Oh, it's outrageous. You watch it, you're
Yeah,
like, how are they not beating him up?
that's why, because he's got like some 6 foot guy behind him who's ready to just
Yeah,
eat them if they say anything.
outrageous.
But that blew my mind. I was like, seriously? Like,
Yeah,
and what's
yeah,
worse about that is that all the people in the restaurant who are, yeah, that's real people. That's their real business.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
that they're aware of that. They know that everyone on set is a paid actor. Like, how do they deal with that? Like,
I know it's kind of crazy. I mean, these are things that I don't quite understand.
sure,
I
yeah.
mean, it must be the trader, I guess, from like as long as they look like good people at the end of it, it's free advertising, as you were saying earlier.
Well, it's not good with that show because, like, I think it was there's 70 or 80% of the store or the restaurants that were on that show closed down within the first 3 years or year
Yeah, outrageous.
of the shows coming out. Some of them
I mean,
closed before even their show aired. So,
how they convince these people to be on this show, I have no idea. I mean, I have a hard enough time
like you
trying to
said,
convince some people.
advertising. That's
Yeah,
100%. It's like what we said earlier. Like, um, it always comes down to that. You know, I hear people sometimes say like, "Oh, any advertising is good advertising, even if it's bad." I disagree with that, but I do think there's a case to be made for just having airtime. Like in the context
yeah,
of that show, if you think about it, it's automatically bad. You're on a show where you're basically admitting that your restaurant is terrible and failing, and then this world class chef comes on and fixes your restaurant. And many of them obviously did express successes thereafter. Some actually were able to continue. So there are a few good examples, but
yeah.
generally speaking, they came off worse than if they'd have ever gone on the show.
I know, it's pretty crazy. I mean, these are things that I'm like, what? How is this? How are you able to make this show? I mean, like we had so many troubles. I've had so many experiences, but it's so tough trying to convince some people to do it and to be on a show where the outcome is going to be good. Like they're going to look like great people, but they're not going to do it. And then meanwhile, they're able to convince this failing restaurant to be on national TV with Gordon Ramsay absolutely slating them. How?
Right, I got some fan questions for you. Shout out to Vilma who sent some of these in. Thank you so much. These will go in different directions. Still about your TV production work, but let's see where we go. We've obviously been talking a lot about some of the crazier experiences you've had, but what are the craziest TV stories that you can share with us that have experienced over your career?
Craziest TV stories. Gosh, I'd say that the craziest ones are always on the shows where I mean it's always documentaries where you are making it about someone else's life. So and if it's a crime doc, then that's always fantastic because then you get to meet like yeah, as we were saying earlier on, like cocaine kingpins and um like on inside the world's toughest prisons where you're locked in a cell with people that are completely unfazed by the cameras and threatening to stab your presenter. And yeah, I think a lot of them can be really good fun though as well. Like, you know, you can be making a show with like the armed forces. I've made a documentary with them before and you can have a really good time. Like you are able to do things that you shouldn't be allowed to do,
I
which
feel
I
like this
can't
is
say.
yeah.
Um,
I tried, guys. I tried.
yeah, I'm really sorry about that one, man.
It's like you reeled me in just to let me go.
Yeah, I was thinking like probably should not say this.
No, you've been very forthcoming. I appreciate you, man. Thank you. Let's steer it in a different direction. So you mentioned that you sometimes, for the most part, you work for a particular production company. But I guess
Yeah,
what I'd like to know is, so the question here is, are you a freelancer or are you employed, work for a specific station production? So I'm going to switch the question a bit. Is it always the case that people in your field work exclusively like for a production, or is it more that there's like a kind of a mixture and a blend? I mean, for example, um, when the pandemic sort of came and changed the industry, did you have like an influx maybe of more freelancers and self-employed?
yeah.
Like, talk us through like what the general kind of setup is for people working in production as far as their kind of status is concerned when it comes to their how they
Sure.
work.
Yeah, yeah. So what you find is that most of the industry is freelance.
Okay.
What people will do is they'll normally start off as a researcher or a runner with a production company, um, and that allows them to get experience, and so that they can then once they've got enough experience, then they'll be able to go freelance. And it is that way because it's just the way of the industry, you know. Like you become a cameraman or whatever and you become freelance so then you can jump from job to job to job and always be experience something new as well that's what's so great about it. But then you do also get some some people who are in-house like myself. I was predominantly employed as a development producer. So this was the coming up with the show ideas, selling them. But then I was fortunate enough to be able to have the opportunities to then also work on productions. Um, and yeah, so I'd say that, you know, you build up enough experience at the start of your career to then be able to go freelance. Because when you freelance, you know, you're sending your CV out to production companies and, you know, the producer might get your CV and be reading it and be like, oh, this person has only ever worked on 2 shows. Why will I ever employ them? As opposed to the other guy who's worked on like 10 shows, he's got some great references. And so you need to build that up
Mm.
and get there. And if that means working with the same production company for a year or whatever across several shows, then that's something you got to do. But yeah, it's predominantly freelance.
That's interesting. I would have never have thought that that was the case. I mean, it does make sense to some extent. I mean, I'm an actor, so like everything I
Mm.
do is freelance. Like, and that in a way kind of blew my mind, but also it made perfect sense because it's like,
Yeah,
every time you're working on a project, you work on it for a given amount of time, it ends, you move on. Um,
yeah,
which is why it
that's
was,
that's how it is.
yeah, it explains why, for example, like when you see actors and they look pretty like kind of tired because they're doing this promotion, it's because they've done like, I don't know, 30 to 50 interviews in a day
Yeah,
for a film that they recorded like a year before. And since they've since worked on several projects since then,
yeah,
which is always weird to think about. Like right now, like I'm having a similar scenario where there'll be things that I forgot I even did because it's been so long, and then they're like,
mm,
"Oh, hey, can you promote this for us?" And I'm like, "Yeah."
yeah.
What was it again?
No, exactly. I
Like,
think that's one thing that when my last track came out, I made it literally like a year before,
yeah.
and then the label decided to release it like completely out of the blue, and I was like, oh
Oh,
yeah, I did that, and then they asked to like write about some stuff to do with it, and I was just like, fuck, what did I do? Like, what was that? Like, what was the process? Like they're like, oh, what was the process? And you're doing it. I was like, I don't fucking know.
turn the
I just made
computer
it.
on. Opened up, Oh no,
Yeah.
I mean it's yeah. I suppose because they always want a story to sell, don't they? They want like
Oh yeah, of course.
behind the lyrics, behind whatever the sound, etc. Like it because it's like what we were talking about
And there
earlier with the
always is
connection.
like an interesting story there,
Yeah,
but you've just you got to dig back in your memory.
this is a fun question. How different is being a TV producer from being a music producer?
God, they're
Right.
completely different industries. So music producing is it's basically like composing, but you've also got the mixing, the mastering, you've got the technical elements with it. TV production, you are making a show, but it's not so much hands-on. Like, you know, a music producer might be compared to like a TV editor or
Mm-hmm.
something. I wouldn't be in there, and I have done it. I have done editing before. That's how I first started in media was editing. But then you don't ever like do any of that yourself. You're kind of more, yeah, like almost like project managing, but creatively, and like kind of like juggling lots of things and like ensuring it goes in a direction.
There you go, Vilma. You have your answer. Great question. Thank you. Um, yeah, one final question just from this section. Again, another fun question. Thanks for this, Vilma. Is working as a TV producer stressful? How do you manage stress? And how do you organize your time in order to be efficient? And also, how difficult is it to juggle your professional and private life? So, yeah,
Mm. Yeah.
talk us through TV production stress, my friend.
All right. All right. So stress of TV production. God, like it is stressful. It is a stressful industry, So you, on the one hand, in development, we've got tons of ideas and like loads of work to do, and you get all this rejection. So that's stress number one. But you then get relieved of that when you get these bites of success. And it's almost like, yeah, like if you're an actor and you apply for like a million roles and then you end up getting that one that just like makes you super happy and just makes it all worthwhile. And then on productions as well, I'd say that a lot of the stress in making factual TV would come from kind of coordinating people and making a show a bit more like being able to make a show basically because it's not like a film set where everything's like structured to the T and it's got to be like done on hour, otherwise you're fired. It's like you're kind of running around trying to do stuff, and it's always things are changing depending on like what you're shooting, what you're filming. I mean, I have been on sets of like cooking shows where it's very structured, but yeah, it's stress of like running around trying to be able to make things happen. And like I guess the way to deal with that stress is, I mean, it's just like any other work stress, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like I have moments where I'm like pulling my hair out and like going crazy and being like, this fucking person, like who shall not be named, as like, how have they worked in this field before? Like they don't know what the fuck they're doing. How and it just makes you like, but then you need to vent.
Hmm.
Obviously not to anyone, but also just like having other things to do. Like this is why I have my music as
Yeah.
well. Like it's that release, it's that relaxation. You can't spend your entire life doing one piece of work, and that stress builds up and you explode because yeah, you will explode. And if you haven't yet, maybe look for something else to do as well, like
Okay.
something to take the edge off.
Exactly. Get some vices, guys. Um, you mentioned about people getting fired and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Most unprofessional things you've ever seen on a TV production set, or craziest reasons for someone getting fired?
I mean, there's all kinds of crazy shit that people do, but it's always like it's almost always they're terrible at their job. Like we had this one person that just like they were supposed to be sort of in charge of this shoot, and
The director,
they
or
yeah
just
they was the producer director.
okay.
It was a low budget show. This was one not one that I was on, but I was in the same production company at the time, so I saw it happen in front of my eyes. But this person, they were supposed to be organizing this shoot, and it was so disorganized, and it when it was going really badly, and it's basically this person's responsibility to do it. But they got to the point where they had like almost a mental breakdown
Oh,
in front of the boss, the the managing director, like on the morning before they were supposed to go to the shoot. So this person like is screaming, being like, "This is the worst thing I've ever had to do," and everyone else is just kind of standing there really awkwardly, like, what do we do?" And then there's this person like they just could not really do their job. And then they ended up having a mental breakdown, walked out, and so then the shoot had no producer director, no PD for it, which was supposed to happen in like half an hour's time. And then so like I'm pretty sure they got like some emergency person in to kind of like last minute call to come and do it. But
wow.
that was pretty crazy. Yeah. And I guess that might be stress as well. Maybe this
Damn.
person didn't have a release,
That was
you know?
intense, man.
I
Here's me
know,
asking
right?
like, "Oh, maybe we get a funny story," and then we just get like a really like intense, like,
Yeah,
"Yeah, fair
sorry.
play, man."
Sorry about that. There's no
No,
like
that's fine. It's fine.
wrong
I
sandwich or
I feel for that person, man. I hope they were able to recover from that's not easy. I mean, I can imagine how stressful it must be. You got all these
yeah,
different elements. If especially if it's like your first production or something, that's got to be pretty tough. But
yeah,
I mean,
yeah. No,
how,
I
I
mean like
also,
it
how
does
does
the stress builds up for some people, and this is why you need to be able to manage your time and your stress
mm,
effectively. This is why I have music as well. You
absolutely.
got to have it.
Let's move it forward. I found something very interesting about your background. Well, there's a lot interesting about your background. So,
Yeah.
you used to be a cyclist,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, you were involved in a traffic accident that forced you to actually stop. Sorry, you were originally,
Yeah,
was it
so
you were doing one thing and then you transitioned to cycling? I can't read my own
yeah,
handwriting here, so I do apologize. Rowing, is that right?
yeah. So I
Yes,
was doing
right.
rowing.
So yeah, you were doing rowing.
Um,
You transitioned to cycling because of this accident.
yeah.
Walk us through this experience of going through that accident and how you kind of first of all made that transition, but also I'd like to know about how you kind of got through that struggle and moved through to cycling.
Yeah, so yeah, I was a rower at school. In sixth form. I was so like 17, 16, 17. I did rowing and I was two-time national champion, international gold medalist, and
Woo!
then one day, and I took up cycling just to and from rowing training to kind of like help with fitness. And then one day, I got hit by a car, like just like went into the back of me,
Jeez.
literally like a few hundred meters away from my house. And it was a hit and run. They drove off, and I was like,
Oh my god.
yeah, it was atrocious. Like shattered my shoulder, had to have it reconstructed, um, and it was pretty gutting because I was doing rowing. Obviously, you need a shoulder to row, but I was also like I was so kind of um, caught up in this accident that I kind of thought, you know what, I'm gonna get through this, and then I'll start rowing again a year later or whenever I can do it. I did physio and all this, that, and the other to try and get back to it. And during that time, I started doing cycling like on an indoor trainer to kind of keep fitness up, keep strong. Rowing's like 90% in the legs, so keeping them strong. And then by the time I could actually get back onto a rowing machine, um, I'd done all this physio, I'd strengthened my shoulder, been through all this work to do it. I hated it because I wasn't as good as I was. And I was like, felt so left behind. Like, I was like, all my ex crewmates were all like, going and doing like all this like GB stuff. And I was like, just kind of like stuck a year behind almost. And then so I thought, no, I don't want to do that anymore. I've done all this for kind of nothing. So then I thought, oh, actually, you know what though? I want to stay fit. I really enjoy the cycling. So I started doing that, and I am quite competitive by nature. And then so I started doing it really seriously, really quickly, just because I wanted to be good. And then I transitioned into cycling, did some races, and then after some years, I got really good and became professional for a bit, and then that ended because I was doing a race in France, a professional race, and we were going downhill 80 kilometers an hour. You know how cyclists are, and
Yeah.
they've got like a bit of plastic on their head to kind of protect you. And I got pushed or nudged into a curb that was like maybe like 20 centimeters, 30 centimeters high. It was a huge curb. Like, God, why do they have these curbs there anyway? Front
Oh
tire
my
hits
god.
it. I flip face plant at 80 kilometers an hour.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I know, right? So I'm then waking up with like I won't get into details because it's gross, but like half my face hanging off. And
Oh
yeah,
Jesus.
and then so I was like, you know what? Um maybe I've got to do something else.
Jesus Christ. See, this is interesting because I remember when I originally did my research on you, I thought like, oh, this is tough. And of course, it's no doubt was tough for you, I imagine. But like
Yeah,
at the same time, it seems like you took it with like almost with an ounce of humor, like, maybe maybe the universe is telling me something here. Maybe I should like transition into something
yeah,
else again.
literally.
But I feel like this is a fascinating aspect to your life because it's if there's something to be picked up from your life, it's the master of reinvention. It's you've kind of proven that you when you put your mind to something, you work hard enough for it. You can achieve a lot of different things in your life, and you don't have to just do the one thing. And
Yeah,
this is something I relate to personally. For me, it's about keeping things interesting. I like doing podcasting, acting, music, content creation, whatever, because it's
mm,
all the processes are different. They all link on the creative sphere, but they're all totally different.
yeah,
And it's the same for you. Like sports is, that takes a great deal of perseverance, motivation, determination, everything. And it seems to me like you've kind of just taken that and applied that to your career in music production and sound production. Um, I guess one thing I'd like to know though is like how did you kind of retain that motivation? Because that's hard, man.
yeah,
You put all this time and effort into rowing, you hit with an accident. There's nothing you can do. It's just this life, isn't it? And then it happens
yeah,
again. Talk us through like how you initially got through and thought because it's happened twice now, and it's like
yeah.
how do you internalize that? How do you kind of move past that and get to where you are today?
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. At the time, there is a period where you're like super upset about it, and
Sure.
mental health does affect you. Like, you become a bit depressed. Like, oh, I put all this work and effort into this. And, when I quit cycling, I was it was a really big time for me because this was like it almost defined who I was.
Wow.
But it moving on from that moment where you're finally able to be like, okay, I need to do something else. I guess I need something to kind of obsess over. I
I get
guess
it. I
like
get
I
it.
have this obsessive personality where I kind of I need to do something as well as I can. Like I don't want to just half-ass anything. I don't want to kind of do music production, or I don't want to kind of be a cyclist or just do it for fun. Like I start doing it. I'm like, oh, but I can do that better. Oh, and I can do that better, and that better, and that better, and that better. And then before I know it, I'm spending all my time doing it and kind of trying to be the best that I can possibly be with it. And then moving on from one to another, so like from the rowing to the cycling, I guess I also I have less issue with that than you would expect, I guess, which would be the surprising answer because I guess I always want something new in my life. I guess that's why I'm in TV because every job is a new one. Every production is something new, something different. One minute I'm working on a hip hop doc, the next time with like a crime documentary, the next time with the military, the next time in a prison, whatever, you name it. But it's that kind of you bounce from one thing to another, keeping your life interesting. I want to experience as much shit as possible and be really good at it.
Have you ever had any productions that brought you back in the sphere of rowing or cycling?
Uh, no, I tried. I
Yeah.
tried once to get a show to get a documentary with this cycling team that I had some friends that knew these people, so it was friends of friends, where it was basically this indoor track cycling team that were independent. They were just like a group of mates that were really good at what they did, but they were ending up going to like cycling World Cups as an independent people. So they're up against like the GBs,
Wow.
USAs, France, whatever, and they're winning.
Damn.
And I really, really wanted to make this documentary about them and them going into like win the world championships and break the world record. Um, and then just there was no interest in it. Like
Really?
because yeah, this is the thing. It sounds sick, right? It
Yeah,
sounds
it's like a
amazing.
movie idea right
Yeah,
there. I mean, come on.
I know, right? But this is that's TV for you, man. Like you gotta this is what I mean by right person, right place, right time.
See, now
You've
you've said it,
gotta
like we'll know in like a few years from now if it gets made, we'll be like, okay, well, where's our
yeah,
money?
yeah, exactly. Give it to me.
Give me the fucking money.
Yeah, exactly. But
Which,
yeah, it's this that's the thing, is like that it's these like incredible stories that you really
hmm.
want to tell. But anyway, that was probably the closest that I got to that. Um, and yeah, my experience of within the cycling world kind of helped me be able to know about it and make it and that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's pretty cool.
Absolutely is, man. Oh, I could ask you questions all day, but gonna wind it down. Ask you a couple of quick fire questions I ask every guest.
Yeah,
What's the best advice you've ever received?
best advice I've ever received. God, that is difficult. I would say best advice I've ever received is don't don't care about how well you do it or like the end result compared to other people. So like say if I'm going to do cycling or music production, I don't care if I'm not um you know the next number one selling musician or like the next Chris Hoy or whatever, as long as I do the best that I can. So yeah, so don't compare yourself to others. Just as long as you do the best that you possibly can, you can never be disappointed in yourself. So even if you put in 100% of the effort and you don't make it, you'll still know that you tried the hardest you could to do it, and you'll never have that sort of disappointment looking back on it. At the time, yeah, you might be disappointed that you didn't make a team or whatever, but looking back on that in 10 years' time, you'll be like, nah, I tried as hard as I possibly could.
What do you think changes as far as like your? Because I got to say, like I relate to this very deeply when
Yeah.
it comes to failure, and I accept that it's a big part of you know the
It's a
entertainment
huge part.
industry, right, and everything we do. But what do you think it is that changes over the years that makes you think, you know what, at least I tried, and that kind of feeling of disappointment that you didn't make it
Mm.
then dissipates? Why do you think that is?
I'd say it's sort of as I mean, because you have so much failure. This is
Mm.
the thing, is that everyone only sees like success, like social media and all that. Everyone only sees successes. Behind that, everyone's trying a million and one things. I've made a million and one songs that are failing. I hate them. I'm not sending them to labels. I'm not doing any of this. Then you always see that one success. But behind that, there's so much failure. And being able to deal with that failure is so important. And at the time, yeah, it'll be fucking horrible and you'll hate it. And you'll hate that kind of feeling that you've failed almost. But as soon as you realize that, okay, but you tried as hard as you could, then as time goes on, you start to like you become more distanced because you do other stuff. Other things take priority in your life. I don't look back on rowing now and think, oh, that one training session where I didn't do that hard enough. But it's basically like as long as you look back at it and you don't have that midlife crisis and they're like, but I could have been good enough. No, no, no. You weren't good enough because that's just human nature. And not everyone's going to be good at everything. You know, some people, I'm not amazing at acting, for example. And so I'm never going to be a Hollywood A-lister. But I know that if I try to be as good as I can at something, that I can never look back at it and feel, oh, what if?
Okay. Well, I do agree with what you're saying. I want to pick
Okay.
at it, but only for one detail.
Yeah.
With your life specifically, you had these two things that you excelled at that one could argue from sort of a fate perspective, you were robbed. Because it's not like you failed because, I mean, did you really fail? You had accidents, which that's very different. If we're talking about like, oh, I applied for a role and I didn't get it, you can argue,
Yeah.
oh, maybe I didn't prepare well enough. Maybe I didn't, I don't know, have enough train, whatever. You can maybe look, and I know that the other flip side of that would be like, hey, maybe they just didn't like you. Maybe they,
Yeah.
they had a specific guy in mind. And I totally agree with all that. But with your specifics story, it's like this was taken away from you.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm
I would
sure
say though,
I'm sure you've wondered about that. Like, okay, let's
yeah.
say that those accidents didn't happen. What might my
Yeah.
my life look like? And that's an intriguing question to then answer. And then, do you know what I mean?
But that's the thing though, is that I don't look back at those and think, oh, I failed because
Right.
I
Yeah.
wasn't. But because yeah, I mean I did succeed. I got to that level that I wanted to in cycling. I got to being professional, but I feel like I wasn't the best in the world, but I tried my hardest, and I quit cycling because of other circumstances. With the accident, I moved on to something else. But the thing with the cycling is that I wasn't the best in the world. That doesn't disappoint me. I was still really good because I tried as hard as I could. But then, these are only the successes. There's been other things where I failed. You know,
Sure.
it's like the endless kind of music that I might make, the endless show ideas that I come up with that don't make it. But as long as you try really fucking hard, you won't have that long lasting disappointment.
No, I totally agree. I guess I'm just picky because it's like I find the whole concept of something being taken away from someone
Yeah.
is very fascinating because it's like obviously the story there is hey, this person perseveres, they go on, they do great things elsewhere in their life, and you are testament to that fact, and it's amazing to see. But it's also that I can't help but ask the what if questions. Do you know what I mean? Like what if this,
Yeah.
what if
Yeah.
that, what does that mean? you know
You think these all the time. Yeah.
right.
Like I see people that are like, I don't know, I might have beat them in races all the time when I was cycling, and now I see them and they're like, oh, they're going to Commonwealth Games or whatever. And I'm like, damn, that could have been me. But then I'm like, you have these pangs where you're like, oh, that could be me. But then at the same time, it's not. You tried as hard as you could, and then you stopped it because you had an accident. That's not, I didn't fail,
Well, that's kind
but
of exactly what I meant before as
yeah,
well. Like that's what differentiates it. I
yeah,
don't know that it could ever really be called a failure because it's like, and also I'll add this as well. Um, there's nothing wrong with failure. Failure has like so many
oh yeah,
negative connotations attached to it, and it seems like we're in the same school of thought here that like
yeah,
true failure is never trying.
yeah,
That's the real
exactly.
failure, you know.
That's basically what I was trying to say, but like the
Right.
really long-winded way. That's like we got to make this podcast 5 hours long kind of metaphor.
I promise you, I'm
Like
not trying
I
to
just want
stretch
to
it
stay
out.
chatting to you all day, man. Like I'm just gonna say this really long way.
Let's switch it up. What's the biggest life lesson you've learned so far?
Oh God. Okay. Similar vibe. Biggest life lesson, most important life lesson is that you have got to have perseverance, and you got to keep on going with stuff, because if you don't, then you aren't going to have success. you know, unless you're a nepo baby or you're like strangely weird genetics mean that you're the fastest man alive, you're not going to have that success overnight. And for actors, it could be that they've struggled for years and years and years, and all it takes is that one break, and then you're set up for success because you can then ride that. It's like with my cycling, I tried and tried and tried, and for years I thought, oh, maybe I'm just not good enough. Maybe I'm not going to make it as professional. But you have that perseverance, and one day I got there. I tried hard enough, and I got there. It's the same with music. I had so many songs that I'd sent to labels or that I would make and just weren't good enough. Either because I thought so and I just like throw them in the bin, or because you do get this rejection so much. I know of like top artists that get rejected. Um, it's like, yeah, like you're saying, like the B-sides. Everyone has this, but all it takes is that one little success to then prove to yourself that you can do it. And you just need to keep on trying, because who knows, you could give up tomorrow, but then the next day you would have come up with that song, or you would have auditioned for that role and you would have got it. It's like you've got your whole life to do this shit. Why only spend a tiny proportion of doing it and then complain that you're not successful? You got to have that perseverance. You got to keep on going with it.
But like lately, every time I do this show, I kid you not, I'm going through a time in my life right now where like everywhere I look and what I hear, like I've got this like self doubt and stuff about like whether I'm going to make it myself and all of that. And I kid you
Yeah.
not, I do a show. The people that appear on the show, they're saying exactly what you're saying. I look on my feed, and you know what's funny about like things like TikTok and Instagram is normally they're always listening in the background, as we know. I started getting some super motivational stuff on my feed, like telling me like, keep going, stop giving up, stop complaining. I'm like, it just feels like a sign, man. It feels like a sign from the
I feel that
universe.
that's the your phone's listening to you, and now you're
Yeah,
getting
of
the
course.
ads that
Yeah.
target it.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. But like, just can we just pretend it's fate for 5 minutes? I
Yeah.
mean, to be fair, the podcast element that is fate. Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose you can argue it's what you ask people, but you can never really control what people are going to say. So, but
Yeah.
yeah,
But that
absolutely
this is
wonderful.
it. I mean, this is the thing though. This is why you keep on hearing it, because it's true.
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, yeah, absolutely. Often the best advice is the most simple, really, and that's kind of just how it always works.
Yeah.
But I will say it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for
Likewise.
appearing on the show, and I wish you the very best with all your future projects.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And yeah, it's been sick. Really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you for having me on the show. And yeah, wish you all the best of luck as well.
Thank you very much. And to all the listeners of the Christian Reeve podcast, I hope you enjoyed the episode. As always, let me know what you'd like to hear on the show next time, who you'd like to see on the show next time. Thank you so much for listening. Be safe, be well, and I'll see you in the next one.